Without this one food, the world would go hungry. And considering that this is the most popular food in the world, you'd think that people wouldn't make so many mistakes when cooking it. We're going to talk about the world's most precious food that most people cook all wrong today on the Carefree Cooks Code. I'm Chef Todd Moore, and this is the Carefree Cooks Code, every Tuesday live at noon Eastern. Here's our challenge. How can home cooks cook freely with creativity, confidence, and pride while ignoring recipes and still impressing themselves and others with what they cook? Well, the answer is found in becoming empowered with how cooking works, using dependable and repeatable methods of cooking that work for any ingredient, for any diet, and any desire, just like chefs do. And we'll know we've cracked it when everyone sees cooking as an exciting and rewarding way to improve their relationships, their lifestyles, and their health through better food and cooking. This is the Carefree Cooks Code. Boom! Hey, welcome back to the Carefree Cooks Code, everyone. This is the weekly show for the techniques, the insights into better food and cooking. We're live every Tuesday at noon Eastern, and if you're looking for past videos, they're on the archive on Facebook at facebook.com/chef.todd.more/videos. 11 years worth of videos on there. So good luck. You know what you're going to do this weekend. Hey, how do we all do this? Why do we get together? Who the heck are we anyway? Who do we think we are? Well, we're Carefree Cooks. We create our own recipes. We bring friends and family together. We learn every time we cook, creating our own cooking style, and it's all because we practice the pro methods behind cooking. We don't chase recipes, and we wind up loving our cooking. That's the whole mantra and creed there. Hey, I got a riddle for you today. Okay, here's the riddle. Follow me. I can be brown or white, but I'm not a loaf of bread. I can be sticky, but I'm not glue. I'm originally from China, but I'm not a panda. I grow in a field, but I'm not corn. And I'm used in sushi, but I'm not fish. What's your guess? Well, I saw it in the comments. Everybody knew it already. It's rice! Rice! Of course, you can't take your kitchen on a food vacation anywhere in the world without being able to make rice. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, I've got a true or false for you. Is this statement, tell me in the comments section below, is this statement true or false? Risotto pasta is always made with hot broth or stock. There's no always in there. Risotto pasta is made with hot broth or stock. Is that statement true or false? Tell me in the comment section below. In one of my web cooking classes, in one of the 48 weeks in the curriculum, it's the rice and grains episode, and I start with a simple statement. If it rained rice, the world would be fed. And until recently, I used to believe some things were impossible. And, what we've gone through in the last year, I didn't think that was possible. But look, it's not very likely that it's going to rain rice. But you'll find rice all over the world just like rain. I mean, just try and name a world cuisine without rice. I bet you can't. So this food item that is all over the world, how come so many people have so much trouble cooking it? There are probably more rice cookers purchased than any other gadget. Like, this is the thing you need a specialty gadget for. But there are so many questions swirling around rice than maybe any other food staple in the kitchen. And maybe it's just raining questions about rice around me. Maybe it's not raining rice itself, but these are the questions I get thrown at me all the time. What kind of rice should I buy? How long should I cook my rice? How much liquid should I use for the rice? Should I start it in cold water or hot water? Should the rice be covered or uncovered? How can I make fluffy rice? How can I make sticky rice? Oh, my God, it's enough questions. It's enough to just make you go, oh, look, I'm going to make potatoes instead. just forget it. Potatoes are easy. All those questions seem really, really hard. But it's not. But these questions are really, really easy to answer when you understand what's going on within that little kernel of rice itself. So you'll be able to answer all of these questions for yourself and command a few methods for making rice by the time we're done with the Carefree Cook's Code today. It's just another piece of that puzzle, right? It's another step toward cracking the Carefree Cook's Code. So let's go over a few rice rules to start. And the first thing to understand is that rice is a grass seed. It is one of the most important food crops on the planet, one of the most important crops that are grown. It's also the most controversial because it's where they do the GMO thing. It's where they start altering it. And there's an argument that at least people are eating, versus starving. I'm not here to touch on that today. We grow more sugarcane and corn actually in tonnage. But much of that is, if you want to argue with me about farm yields, I'm not a farmer, but we do grow more sugarcane and corn, but so much of that goes into other processing. So rice is really king in crops when it comes to feeding man. So all the questions that I mentioned a moment ago, they can all be answered with just one concept, because this is what's taught in culinary school. You focus on the two components of starch found in rice, amylose and amylopectin. Now, amylose is actually a sugar. It's a polysaccharide made up of glucose units. We'll go back to nutrition class for that. Won't go down that hole today, but it's one of the necessary components of starch. Amylopectin binds to amylose to form a starch. But in what proteins you have those two elements dictates how much liquid, how to cook it, what dish to use it in, and whether it's going to be sticky or fluffy. So just knowing if your rice is high in amylose or amylopectin solves about answers four of those questions for you. And all rices are categorized into long, medium, or short-grained rice. And the long-grain rices are higher in amylose, right? They tend to remain intact after cooking. So think about your rice-a-roni or your formerly Uncle Ben, right? They don't call it Uncle Ben anymore. Whatever they're calling it now. Think about the wild rice mix, okay? The boxed mix of different rices, long grain rice, black rice, brown rice. They're not very sticky, are they? Like a long grain rice and a brown rice, if you cook them correctly, they shouldn't be very sticky. Think about your favorite Indian restaurant. Think about your favorite Thai restaurant. Now that we're starting to get back to restaurants, even me, these places, these Indian cuisines where you get that really fragrant, really fluffy, it's like snow, right? That jasmine rice. Well, is it a long grain rice or a short grain rice? Take notice of this when you're there. The longer the grain, the higher in amylose, and the more fluffy the rice in general. So pick a longer grain rice. These types of rices need shorter cooking time. So the rices higher in amylopectin, usually the shorter grain rices, then are the sticky ones. So how about the rice that you get from in the square Chinese food container, and you turn it over and it stays in the shape of the container, right? So it's a little stickier. So is that a short grain rice or a long grain rice that you used to get with your Chinese takeout? So this becomes easy when you start to categorize, and you're probably already a few steps in me because you're already thinking about sushi rice, bamba rice, paella, maybe sushi rice and arborio rice. Maybe these are the stickiest rice that are out there. Are they long grain or short grain? Did you ever notice? Did you ever stop to look at the rice? Yeah, sushi rice is short. Sushi rice and arborio rice is so short, it's almost round, right? So how about paella? How about the rices you use for paella? Would you use a long grain jasmine rice that would be very fluffy? Or are you looking for that sticky factor where the rice sticks to all the shrimp and stuff? Are the rices used for risotto, paella, things like that, are they higher in amylose or amylopectin? Look at the bowl over here, right? They're very sticky. They're higher in amylopectin, and they have longer cooking times generally. Anyone that's ever made risotto knows that the main ingredient in risotto is patience, is having to get through the whole process. But because the shorter grain rices keep their structure better, they're higher in sugar than they are in starch. You need less liquid to make a long grain rice than you do a shorter, stickier rice that is higher in amylopectin. Oh my God, Chef Todd, you're getting so chefy on me now. All right, I'll go through that again. Listen to this. A shorter grain rice keeps its structure because they're higher in sugar, not as high in starch. If they're not as high in starch, they need less liquid to cook them. A long grain rice, more starch, right? A gelatinization of starches is all what rice is about. It's one of the 4 effects of heat on food, so you need a little bit more liquid for it. All right, we're going to go over ratios in just a few minutes. I'm going to give you the ratios for making these rices, so you don't need a rice cooker. You can do it just in your regular saucepan, and we're going to review cooking methods. But for now, I'm going to make a general statement for you to start that longer grain rices with more amylose are better for simmering or steaming methods. If you just put liquid and your rice together, you're much better off with a longer grain rice with more amylose. You can steam longer grain rices, again, because they need less liquid and they have shorter cooking times, and that's a lot of what your rice cookers do. They apply more steam to the rice, and you'll notice that rice cookers do a much better job with white long grain rices than they do short brown rices. I know you have trouble with brown rice in your rice cooker when the white rice comes out really good. So the stickier rices are really better used in a combination cooking methods because they're often coated in fat or sautéed first, and I'm going to explain why we do that in just a minute. So let me give you some examples of the rices to buy, examples of long grain rice, things like jasmine rice. That's the Indian, fluffy, very long grain. You can see them. An American long grain rice, a basmati rice, and strains of black and brown rices that are long. Short grain, sticky rices, I've already mentioned, are arborio rice, used for risotto, bomba rice, used for paella, sushi rice, used for sushi. I have each of these rices in my cabinet, and in my opinion, so should you. They last forever if you keep them in an airtight container. It's a pantry item that you can have 6 different types of rices, and then this makes 6 different types of dishes, right? Many of the brown rices, though, that still have the outer coating, the outer bran on a brown rice, they're shorter and higher in amylopectin, but the fact that they're less processed with that bran, they still have that outer coating intact. This naturally inhibits the gelatinization of starches. So it's kind of an exception to the rule. You can have a short grain brown rice that's not very sticky because of the processing and the way it's cooked. But ultimately, this will dictate whether you're going to have a fluffy or a sticky rice. So here we go. First, which type of rice are you going to cook? Is it a long grain rice or a short grain rice? Note, is it higher in amylose or amylopectin? Anticipating that it's going to be fluffy or sticky. Then the amount of time that you cook it, the amount of liquid you cook it in, the method you use to cook it, this is all going to dictate your fluffy or sticky results. So let's talk about the cooking methods for rice in just a second. Since rice is a dried seed, basically of a grass plant, it would make sense that all rice cooking methods would include moist heat. You're not going to be able to grill rice. Okay? It's never going to get anywhere. You can always start a rice dish with conductive heat, with dry conductive heat, but you're always going to finish with a flavorful liquid unless you like chipping your teeth. That's the truth. Rice is not going to get softer without liquid, plain and simple. So the most used method for cooking rice is simmering. And let's take a minute to remember the difference between boil, simmer, and poach as I teach in web cooking classes, because all moist cooking is not the same. Most people think you boil everything, and the truth of the matter is boiling isn't even a cooking method. You shouldn't even be doing it in your kitchen. Boil is large, violent bubbles, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius. Simmer is a softer convection, small bubbles around the rim of the pan, 185 degrees Fahrenheit, 85 degrees Celsius. Poaching is even softer. Hardly any movement to the liquid, no bubbles at all. I call it lazy river. You just kind of see things moving ever so slightly in your liquid. That's only 165 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 74. So you got to go Goldilocks with the rice on this. Boiling is too high. Poaching is too low. Simmering is just right, Goldilocks. You should never boil your rice in a pot. The high temperature, the violent motion changes the entire chemistry of our new friends, amylose and amylopectin. If you boil rice, the two of them bind together and they turn to glue. Well, not literally glue, but I know just about everyone has walked away from their rice, gone on and done something, come back and be like, oh my goodness, it's boiling, and turn the heat down. But what they didn't realize is at a boil, the moisture turns to steam and evaporates into the atmosphere, and that's the liquid that your rice was supposed to be absorbing, gelatinizing, swelling with. But if it evaporates because of the boil, it ruins the very important ratio of liquid to rice. If half your liquid evaporates because it was boiling while you looked out the window at the squirrels and the birds, like I do, it used to be the pigeons and the ambulances and the helicopters, now it's the squirrels and the birds. That means you're going to have concrete rice, basically, if you walk away. There will always be a simmering aspect to cooking your rice, but you can also cook it in a combination cooking method. Risotto, paella, rice pilaf, three very typical dishes that take advantage of coating the raw rice grains in fat before introducing the liquids. And coating the rice grains in fat inhibits the gelatinization of starches. So in other words, you're slowing the rice from soaking up the moisture. And if you've got really sticky rice, this could actually be a good thing. I mean, if you let arboreal rice run wild, very high in amylopectin rice, it's going to be a very sticky, gluey mess instead of the creamy, starchy texture that you should get. You know, this is why people say, I made risotto and it's just like glue. I thought it was supposed to be sticky. Is that the same thing? It's not. It's supposed to be creamy, not sticky. And it's the same with the bomba rice that you use for paella. The Spanish dish is made by sautéing the short grain rice first, adding proteins and aromatics, and then adding the liquid. And if coating a short grain rice in fat will slow down the stickiness, imagine what it'll do for a long grain rice higher in amylose that is already fluffy. So like in rice pilaf, you can saute the rice in oil or just put it in the oven with a pat of butter and some liquid that'll melt in. But a well-made rice that uses the pilaf method should be really fluffy. It should be even dry without anything sticking to each other. And it's done by adding fat to rice that already isn't very sticky. If you have a local Afghani or Pakistani restaurant, they probably serve a biryani with their entrees. This is a long grain jasmine rice cooked in a pilaf method, and it just falls apart like snow. It's just fantastic rice. Not only does coating the rice in fat inhibit the gelatinization of starches, but so do acids. Acids inhibit gelatinization of starches. So have you ever noticed a very slight tang to your sushi rice? You probably shouldn't, okay? But what's there? How about a little bit of balsamic vinegar in your risotto? You know, just maybe just a little pop to it. Could there be alcohol in your paella? some sherry maybe? Could there be lemon juice in your paella? Could there be lime juice in your Caribbean rice? Just a few dashes of an acidic condiment after cooking the rice, okay? So we make our sushi rice, and what I do is I squeeze a little bit of rice vinegar or just plain old white distilled vinegar. And what I mean by squeeze is I have my bottle of vinegar. I drill a hole in the top so it becomes a squeeze bottle. Nonetheless, that's an aside. A few dashes of something acidic after the cooking is done on a sticky short grain rice can lessen the stick factor afterward. So a good sushi rice gets a little bit of sweet rice wine vinegar at the end, something like that. Your risotto, again, can get some lemon juice. Your paella could get chopped up tomatoes. Don't cook it in tomatoes. Don't add tomatoes early to your paella because that acid affects the way that the rice cooks. Add your tomatoes almost as a garnish at the end. It pretty much accomplishes the same thing. All right, two other things I want to mention about moist cooking methods with rices. I mentioned it earlier. The first is that a short grain rice can be steamed. And an indirect, moist method of heat does a really nice job in keeping the kernels separate and cooking at a higher temperature than just simmering liquid. So this is one of the things where I like the rice cooker, but it's also a way that you can create one with your basic colander and creating a steam chamber. But the advantage of steam over simmering is the high heat, is the higher heat that comes from steam. A really good way to cook white, fluffy rices. The next question that comes at me is about starting rice in hot liquid versus cold liquid. Should you bring the liquid and the rice to a boil first, or should you boil the liquid and then add the rice? And of course, you started at a boil, you add the rice, it's a cold liquid, it comes down to a simmer, you adjust the temperature, right? I'm not contradicting myself. This is a really good question. Which way? All together, heat on, or heat and then rice? But it really returns to the idea of amylose versus amylopectin. So, in general, long grain rice that's going to use less liquid, right, to cook more quickly, yielding a fluffier rice. I've already said this, you're with me, right? Long grain rice using less liquid to cook more quickly, yielding a fluffier rice should be introduced into a boiling liquid that is then reduced to a soft simmer. Right? Your long grain, your fluffy rice. Better way to do that because there's less gelatinization of starches. And these are usually the processed white rices. With the outer layer removed, the quicker, higher heat is best used here. But short grain rices can be done either way. It depends on the outcome that you're looking for, right? Short grain rices like arborio or bamba are usually sauteed first, as I mentioned a minute ago. But since they're already hot from the saute procedure, they get hot liquid added to them. So the short grain rices are hot on top of hot if you're doing that procedure. If you use cold liquids or even room temperature liquids for your risotto or your paella, you're putting a stop to the cooking immediately. You're sauteing stuff in fat, it gets really, really hot, then you throw cold liquid on it, it stops. And if you're making risotto and you keep throwing cold liquid on, the cooking stops each time. And that's why you get really sticky risotto. Gelatinization of starches, whoop, falls below. Up, gelatinize again, whoop, fall below. It's a roller coaster of gelatinizing your rice. It is very important to use hot liquid with those short grain white rices if you're making risotto or paella or anything like that. Now, brown rice is another story. And without boring you with a farmer's almanac dissertation of the different layers of a grain of rice, and we needn't do that, let's just say that brown rice is wearing a scuba suit. Brown rice is wearing a neoprene suit. It's a tough outer layer on the brown rice that gives it its crunchy texture and flavor. Now, there are many different results you can get from cooking brown rice, but generally you need to unzip that scuba suit to cook the brown rice well. And that's why brown rice is often soaked in warm water for up to an hour before heat is applied to it. This has nothing to do with arsenic. I don't know where this came from. This has nothing to do with washing it or washing the starch off. It entirely has to do with soaking the outer bran, with cracking the grain. But you don't have to soak brown rice before cooking it. You can start the brown rice in cold water, turn on the heat, and let the early stages of cracking that scuba suit take place in the cooking process. Try it that way. Brown rice, cold liquid, flavorful liquid, heat on, let it climb up together and see what the result is. Or you can bring the liquid to a full boil, add the brown rice, turn it way down to a simmer. If you have an electric stove, I usually use 2 burners, so boil on one, and then the second burner is low. I just move it over to the other burner. You'll have a crunchier rice that absorbs less liquid and takes longer to cook. So try it both ways with your brown rice. Cold liquid start, hot liquid start. And if you really like crunchy rice, how about using either of the methods that I just told you about in a rather contradictory way. Think about this. When you start playing with these ideas, what if you sauteed brown rice in butter or oil first and then added a hot stock to it like a risotto method? I don't know. What would the result going to be? Maybe then you're slowing down the gelatinization of the starches in the rice, and it's already going to have a lot of trouble soaking up the liquid because you added the fat. It's going to have more trouble swelling and getting softer. Pardon. So you can control these outcomes when you know what's going on inside the rice. Rinsing your rice before cooking has very, very little effect on any outcome. It doesn't really make any sense. The best idea for rinsing your rice is to find foreign objects. You might find a stick or a rock in there sometimes, but rinsing it with cold water has very little effect because it's hot water that washes the starch away, not cold water. And if you want to rinse your rice or soak it in hot water beforehand, then you are starting that gelatinization of starches. Another way for you to experiment with it and find the way that's best for you. When you see something that says instant rice, that means it's been processed, it's been par cooked, then re-dried and sprayed with vitamins and nutrients that were washed away in the cooking. I can't imagine being so impatient that I need instant rice. I don't even buy that. Lastly, let's talk about that all-important ratio of liquid to raw rice because it is the difference between success and disaster. And let's return to that amylose versus amylopectin discussion, long grain rice versus short grain rice. And again, I'm going to make generalizations here because only you can tell me if you like your rice stickier than normal or fluffier than normal. So here it is. Every rice you make, amylose to amylopectin, long to short, falls in between a ratio of 1:1 to 1:3. All right. The browner the rice, like I said, the more liquid. The higher in amylopectin, the more liquid you need. The longer the rice, generally, the less liquid. The higher in amylose, the less liquid you need. Some examples. Your basic long grain rice, like jasmine or basmati, uses 1.5 to 1.75 times the amount of liquid as rice. 1.5 to 1.75, under 2. Doesn't matter what measurement you're using. Don't ask me if this is ounces or ladles or whatever it is. I could make up a measurement on Mars called the Zooplac. And if a Martian came down, I would tell him you'd use 1 zooplac of raw rice and 1.5 zooplacs of a flavorful liquid. It doesn't matter. That's why a ratio works. Cups, liters, liquid, ounces, it doesn't matter. An unrefined brown... What was that? An unrefined brown rice or a short grain arborio or bomba rice high in amylopectin will use a ratio of at least 1:2 and up to 1:3. And I've already explained why brown rice needs that much liquid to crack the scuba suit, and the short grain rices really love to suck up the liquid. And whenever I make risotto or paella, I make sure I have 4 or 5 times as much broth or stock because, number one, so much evaporates during cooking and so much is absorbed by the rice. You're always surprised at how much liquid your risotto or your paella is going to take. It is always better to have more than less. I like that. Maybe a new slogan. All right, so start with 1 to 1.5 for your white rices, 1 cup of rice, 1.5 cups of liquid. Go to 1 to 2 for your brown rices, 1 cup of brown rice, 2 cups of liquid, and 1 to 3 for your really short, sticky, short grain rices. And I think that's a really simple way to approach it. You might find your perfect rice with 1 zooplac of raw rice and 1.85 zooplacs of Martian chicken stock. I get silly in the last few minutes, but like most things in cooking, figure out what's right for you. I mean, even if I draw a line, even if you draw a line, and that's what I do. I take a marker and I drew a line on one of the measuring cups I have. That's the line for rice. That's where I figured out over a matter of time that's perfect. The perfect liquid for a 1/2 cup of raw rice for Heather and I. Or look, I'm here to tell you after 29 minutes, you can ignore everything I just told you and just use the spaghetti method. The spaghetti method is where you just boil any amount of rice, you taste it as you go, and then you pour it all through a colander, you pour it out. It's really imprecise, but it's another way. You don't have to worry about measuring the liquid. But I like to have my rice absorb that flavorful liquid that I gave it. So once you can identify your rice as short grain or long grain, white or brown, you can start to expect certain results. Then think about the appropriate method for cooking the rice, the type of rice, and the proportion of raw rice to liquid that you will control the stickiness or the fluffiness of the final product. Sticky rice too sticky? Saute it in fat first, or mount with an acid afterward. Fluffy rice too sticky? Well, you're probably using too much liquid or boiling the rice. But now you have a good underlying concept of what goes on when you cook rice, and from now on, you control the outcome and you make the rice you want. So here's a little bit of homework for you guys. If you're a lifetime member of Web Cooking Classes, you're in our Carefree Cooks community, our private community for lifetime members. I want to see a bunch of rice dishes this week. I want to see you playing around with long grain rice versus short grain rice, sticky versus fluffy. See if you can start with the intention of making the stickiest rice ever or the fluffiest rice ever using these tips that I've given you, and observe how you control the process. It's like playing pool. You got to call the shot. I'm going to make a sticky rice. You can't just, oh yeah, hey, look, there's the sticky one, right? This is eye-opening. And it's the gateway to start cooking multicultural dishes in your home. If you want to travel the world, if you want to start matching ingredients from all over the place, rice is the gateway drug. Being able to cook a variety of rices in a bunch of different methods means you can take your kitchen on a food vacation anytime you want, anywhere around the world. Okay, wow, what a dissertation on rice. Yeah, I'm running over. Let's get back to the true or false today. I tricked you. I'm sorry. It was a tricky one. Yes, you do make risotto with hot broth or stock, but there's that word pasta in there. Risotto is not a pasta. I asked if the statement was true or false. Risotto pasta is made with hot broth or stock. No, it's not a pasta, so it's false. Sorry. Tricky one. It's made with arborio rice. Look, if you know someone who's having trouble controlling the sticky factor in their rice, please share this video with them, because it's the #1 food in the world. It's way too important to cook wrong. My latest online web class may help you with this as well. It answers the question that comes at me from all angles lately. How do you know what foods go together? Big cooking question. So I went ahead and created Become a Food Matchmaker, a class for you, 5 steps to choosing the perfect combination of flavors in your cooking. And if you want to start matching how you cook to the item you're cooking, which aromatic vegetables to use, what kind of sauce to prepare, how to use herbs and spices in the dish. There's a lot of fun going on here. This free class is for you. Go to webcookingclasses.com/match to hold your space in a class. Great class today. Thank you for being with me. We'll see you Thursday at 6 p.m. where we'll be grilling outside again. But for now, it's Chef Todd Moore reminding you that there's always a method to your fluffy and your sticky cooking success. Bye, everyone.